And it's interesting, Jonno, because I tried to ignore it for a really long time.
Yeah.
And even when I started coaching, I was like, nobody actually really needs to hear what happened to me. They just need to know that I'm a good
Mm,
coach and that I've got the skills that they need. And it took me a really long time. Well, I say a really long time. It's taken me 3 years to go, it's your story that will really attract the right women and the right audience to you, but it also
mm.
shows why you're really doing this.
Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Conversations with Jonno White podcast. Today, I'm really excited to have a chat with Frances Scadden. Frances is a confidence, life, and empowerment coach, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for the invitation. I'm pretty excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn about your journey. And first of all, tell our listeners about a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Okay. So I call myself a coach, a speaker, and a women's empowerment mentor. But ultimately, what all of that means is I work with midlife women who have spent years putting everybody first. So they may have been raising the kids. They're probably now caring for aging parents. They've done all of the shoulds and everything looks good on paper, but then they kind of wake up one day and they feel lost and unfulfilled and totally disconnected from who they really are. I see a lot of these women saying things like, I think I'm in the wrong relationship. Oh, maybe my career's not right. Or everything's feeling a little bit flabby now and I need a diet. But really it just comes down to confidence and not really knowing, I guess, the things that inspire them and the things that they want to do right now. So I work with them to help them find those things.
That's awesome. I love that. And I think, there'd definitely be some. I mean, I think everyone can learn from you and your story, but I also love the fact that there might be some women listening who are like, I need to look up Frances and get in touch with her. So let's jump straight into your story. And I want to ask you, as you look back, and if we start with your childhood, but that could be when you were 5, that could be a teenager. When you think back, is it any moments in particular that really shaped you into the leader you are today?
Oh, we could go back so long, right? I'm 51 years of age, so it's a great question. But so if I think back to my childhood, I guess one thing that really shaped me was I didn't know it at the time, but I was growing up with an alcoholic dad and a pretty strong, she seemed pretty strong to me, strong-willed
Mm,
mum. And I always now think back and I think, oh, maybe I was a bit of a dreamer. Maybe I wasn't really paying attention. I was always questioning things and we'd be in the car having these conversations and I remember questioning constantly, but also in my head going, is this really how it's meant to be? I
mm,
remember thinking that a lot. And there was a moment when my mum did leave my dad at one stage, and I think I was early teens, and I was like, oh, finally. Why? What took you so long, mum? What took you so long? And I
mm.
just knew that that wasn't a path I wanted to follow. Um, and so when I think back now, I think that freedom, choices, the ability to carve out my own way have always been really important to me. And I grew up watching women, especially because of my family and then the community that we found ourselves in, but sacrificing so much of themselves for others. It again, it might have been their careers or their dreams or just even their sense of who they was or were. And I think that really planted a really deep seed in me. There was sort of this inner fire, especially when one day I woke up and I went, oh my God, I have followed the conventional path or somewhat of the conventional path. I got married and I had children early, which was unconventional, but I still followed the path because I thought that's what I was meant to do. And then that wasn't working. So found myself as a single mum and then found myself in another relationship, which was an alcoholic relationship. So I'm sitting there going, you followed the path you said you weren't going to follow. And no wonder feel like you're fighting against the the grain a little bit or fighting against yourself. So I really saw firsthand from my mum and the community, but also myself, just how easy it is to lose yourself when you're trying to tickle the boxes, when you're following the shoulds. You should do this. Everybody else is doing it. Why aren't you doing it? And so I think we've all kind of got these defining moments that shape us. And for me, it was just witnessing what happens when women lose themselves and knowing that I was meant to help women change that story.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing that. I think it sounds to me like the real, whenever I work with a team or a leader around their organization and getting really clear on why they exist and who they are, I think the founding story, so if it's an organization with 50 staff, it's going back to when the founder started the organization. I think for you, with what you do, that's so profound. Just in a couple of minutes, what you shared, I can just hear your lived experience. And
it's interesting, Jonno, because I tried to ignore it for a really long time.
yeah.
And even when I started coaching, I was like, nobody actually really needs to hear what happened to me. They just need to know that I'm a good coach and that I've got the skills that they need. And it took me a really long time. Well, I say a really long time. It's taken me 3 years to go, it's your story that will really attract the right women and the right audience to you, but it also shows why you're really doing this. You're not just doing it because coaching seems like a great idea and everybody's doing it, so let's be a life coach. In fact, the first time somebody mentioned to me, Frances, you'd be a really great life coach, I laughed at them and I said, who wants to be a life coach? Nobody wants life coaches. And yet here I am, because it is your story. It's the things that you have been through and the things that you've witnessed, and that why, isn't it? It's the why you do it.
Yeah, and I want to ask you, I'm interested to know from your story and from your experience, and now also coaching women in this, one thing that I hear from your story which really resonates with me is so many of us in all different ways can end up somewhere and look back and think, you know what, if anything, I set my heart on not ending up here. How on earth have I ended up here? What are your thoughts on, how that happens to us in life in 2025?
I mean, if we're to be honest with ourselves, how many of us have said, I'm never going to be like my mum, or I'm never going to be like my dad. I want to do the opposite of what they've done. Not that what they did was necessarily bad, but it's not how I want to be. And I think so many of us say that in our 20s and our 30s. And then all of a sudden we go, oh my God, I can hear my mum's words coming out of my mouth. I sound just like her or just like my dad.
Yeah.
It happens so often. And I think the big reason that we do that without realizing is they were a big influence on us. We spent a lot of our forming, learning, growth years of our life being influenced by them, as they were influenced by their mum and dad or their aunties and uncles. The big influences that are in your life are going to be the people that you unconsciously will follow. It's our biggest learning experience. It's how we learn what we like, what we don't like. It's how we learn our morals and our values. It's how we learn what's important to us. And what we don't, or what we lose sight of, is that those things can change over time. Like, when you're in your 20s, potentially you're not a family man. And then, in your 30s and 40s, you are. And so, of course, your values change a little bit then. But we're not necessarily paying attention to that. And when we don't pay attention and unconscious learning and growing is happening, it's generally going to fall back to the biggest influences in our lives. And that's usually our mum and dad.
You hit the nail on the head. I think that's, so I'm really fascinated to know for you, take us through Frances's awakening in terms of when did you, was this something that you'd thought about when you were younger but never really confronted, or was it something that for you was real, oh my goodness, out of the blue, transformational moment in the past few years?
I think for me, Jonno, this is such a good question. I think that there were influences along the way and there were moments along the way. So it was, first of all, wanting to be a teacher, wanting to influence in that sort of way. I don't know why, I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. But then that felt way too conventional for me. So the idea of teaching, and it felt very constricted by the hours and semesters and, all of the way you had to teach. So I didn't want to do it that way. So, I sort of followed some of these other paths and went and did my Bachelor of Business and focused on human resources because I thought I could teach and influence in that sort of way. I soon realised that comes with its own rules and restrictions as well. So again, found myself not overly comfortable in that. I think my real awakening, it happened a few times. There's been many. So, in your 20s you have one, and in your 30s you have one, and in my 40s I was just kind of enjoying things. I was growing and I was happy and not consciously paying attention until burnout hit me. And then I found this fabulous thing called, first of all, I found that I had a part to play in burnout just as much as being in environments that weren't great for me. Secondly, I found this thing called human design. I don't know if you know of it, but it's a great mix of astrology and I Ching and a few other variances there. And it really showed me the type of person that I am, but it showed me much more than that. It almost gave me a permission slip to all the things that I've noticed about myself along the way that I was led to believe were no good or you should unlearn, were actually just me, and it was a permission slip to be me and then find them a way to use them as my strengths. So, and then next thing I know, I'm potentially perimenopause, menopause. I don't really know what was going on. And then, of course, COVID came. And so it was all kind of, a big learning anyway. But that was really my awakening. That was, hang on, it's okay to be who you are. You can still be successful. You can still be appreciated and respected. In fact, even more so when you accept it. So when I started to accept these things myself, I was noticing that other people were appreciating it and respecting it and reaching out to me. And that's when coaching started. But yeah, human design was a really big influence for my awakening. And also then hitting this aches and pains that happened, the grey hair that I was tired of colouring, so I decided to accept it, the whole menopause or perimenopause or whatever sort of pause it is, what the hell's going on with my body and why is it not responding the way it used to? And yeah, it was just all one big awakening for me that was in my face, and I chose not to ignore it. I think I had been trying to ignore it up until burnout, and then went, heck, I've got to do something here. I can't keep putting my head in the sand.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing. It's fascinating how those same things, which can be what we're trying to suppress or push against or ignore, when you lean into them, they become. You realize, actually, no, this is who I am, and this is actually, unique to me, or this is how I'm wired. Why was I ever trying to do it differently? But, I know for me, the thought that comes to mind as you've shared your story around that is one of the things I've been really, I guess, coming to terms with the past couple of years about myself and how I'm wired is the passion I have for pioneering, starting things and transformation and looking things in the future. And it's taken me a long time to really get this, but I just always assumed that to be a good businessman, to be a good leader, to be a good small business owner, all these things, you have to, I talk about consistency all the time.
Yeah.
And yes, it's good, but there's so much maintenance and that I'm like pushing a rock up a hill trying to be good at around things. And yet when I've actually stopped and gone, Jonno, maybe you should just really focus on stepping in and helping with those transformational transition points and doing that and leaving the maintenance and those things to other people. And it's such a relief, but it's funny that it took me so long to lean into that. I think because part of me thought I just had to do the maintenance stuff. That's how everyone else does it. And maybe there was another part of me that wanted to be able to do that because it's when you narrow down what you do, I think as well as a small business owner, that's scary because
Absolutely.
then I love the phrase choose who you lose for marketing. I love that phrase until you're choosing to lose someone who was going to bring you some cash for your business.
Absolutely.
And then if you're a small business owner,
yeah,
it's like this tension that how do you stay true to yourself and narrow down what it is you do and what you love and who you serve and run a successful business where you need to know cash flow is crucial. So
absolutely.
Any thoughts on that?
I love the way that you've talked about leaning into that, because when we don't lean into these potential learnings and eye-opening aha moments, we are putting our head in the sand and we're finding it very difficult to grow. And that's when we feel really stuck and heavy. And for some of us, it shows up as just pure frustration. For some of us, it shows up as, almost depression and hiding ourselves. It shows up in so many different ways. And then you're talking about consistency, and this is such a big one because everything we do, everyone's talking about consistency. And, I was doing bodybuilding. In my 40s, I was doing bodybuilding. So consistency was key there for food and training and all of these things. But what I have really lent into, using your term, is that consistency is different for everybody. And consistency, so Jonno has a consistent way, I have a consistent way. And that doesn't mean that because they're different, I'm not being consistent compared to you. And I think we need to start to look at this. Let's stop having blanket ways of running business, blanket ways of being a leader, blanket ways of being a mum or a dad or a grandma or whatever it is. Let's stop having these blanket ways of doing things. There are processes and systems and steps that work. And in all, in the things that you do in terms of helping leaders and the things that I do in terms of helping midlife women, we've got steps that are proven to work. But you still need to take into account the individual. You still need to take into account the business that you're working with, Jonno. We still need to take into account the things that have happened to people in their past to have made them who they are. And then knowing their goals, who they want to be or how they want to behave. So it's very good to have these consistent, these things that we deem consistent, or these processes or strategies, but we must personalize at the same time, because there's going to be a constant battle otherwise, and there's always going to be this feeling of I'm not good enough, I'm not successful, I can't do that, that's keeping me stuck, I need it to be perfect first, what if I'm not ready? And fear then comes in and we're uncomfortable again. So if we can start to do things slightly safe with a little bit of consistency and some steps, but also a little bit of uncomfortable, tell me about you in there, and let's incorporate some of your feelings, then we've got room for the individual to work in a systematic way.
Oh man, that's so good. There's so many things I could say to that, because that was just gold. The first thing I want to say is I think you hit where you just absolutely, talking about personalization. I think the future, the next couple of decades, face to face vulnerability in any format is going to just continue to take off. And I think one of the reasons is in 2025, it's funny, but the as the world moves more digital, I think the hunger for those deep experiences and conversations and vulnerability in the face to face around leadership, around midlife women, around hobbies and interests as well, is just going to continue to increase. And so I think that's at play. But something that you talked about there that really prompted a thought for me that I've never had before is I've always been I've really struggled in the past with this idea. If we think from a business perspective, this idea of micro niche, and the reason I've struggled with it before, and this is the first time I've been able to actually articulate something that's been, I think, going around in my brain based on what you were just talking there about personalization, and but I think what's happened is we now, 50 years ago, you just didn't have the opportunities that we have now in terms of the pure breadth of what you can do, of who you can reach anywhere in the world, on any device, at any time. It's that wasn't possible. And as a result, I think if you wanted to do something, you probably had to be more, because it was more narrow in terms of who you could reach and when, etc. You had to be a little bit more broad with your offering. So if you go the extreme, then you used to have the general store. So the general store did everything because that was what they did for that location geographically. They knew the number of people they could reach, and it's kind of like they were the people they could get everything from. And so I think the reason, I think for all of us, particularly in business, what's happened is there's such a breadth of opportunities now. And I think naturally we think, okay, because I can do anything and reach anyone, then it's easy to want to do everything and reach everyone. And so it's like, actually, so because I can now do anything, I'm going to be really broad. I'm going to be, I'm going to be a coach, full stop. Who do you coach? Well, I really coach anyone who needs help. Where are they based? Well, anywhere in the world. And the temptation is to be so broad. But I think, and this is a real counterintuitive thing, I think because we can do anything and reach anyone, it actually means that to be successful, we need to be more narrow than ever in terms of finding the people that we specifically can help. And that's where this idea of micro niching, which I love what you're doing, you're really clear on who you're reaching and what the experiences are for midlife women who go, Frances, that's the woman I need to come alongside me and coach me. And I think, I'd never put those two pieces together around how broad everything is that we can do now in 2025 and access. And yet around the business space, we really do need to be more intentional than ever to be quite narrow with what we do, who we're trying to reach, which feels, for anyone else wired like me, that feels incredibly sacrificial because you want to help everyone and you don't want to exclude anyone. And it becomes another really challenging tension.
Well, let me give you this thought then, Jonno, because I love what you're saying, and what you've said also, I hope when you go back to listen to this podcast, will show you that you having the realization that you don't need to go in and do the full transformation, that you can go in at certain transformation points, shows you that is your perfect opportunity to niche there. Right? That's right back at you. That's your perfect opportunity to niche. We all use, when I think back to high school and everybody was saying to me, all the teachers were saying, Frances, what are you going to be when you grow up? What are you going to be when you leave? What are you going to study at university? What's the rest of your life, your career look like? Oh, that felt so awful to hear that for me, which I understand now because I wanted to have multiple opportunities. I didn't want just one. And, 51, hindsight's a great thing. I wish I'd known that back then. But we were also limited. I was speaking to somebody else about this recently, and for me, the options were a teacher, a nurse, or a secretary. They were pretty much my best options. So now, I mean, the opportunities are endless, but with endless opportunities comes overwhelm. Because, like you've said, we want to do everything. We want to be everything. We want to be the go to person. But how about we just be the go to person for our strengths? So, when we think about big businesses, big successful businesses, they don't have just one person running everything, they have specialists. In medium sized businesses, they have specialists. When we are thinking about our own health and wellness, we have specialists. We don't expect, or I hope not anymore, our general practitioner, our GP, to be able to help us know what's going on and provide us the support we need with everything. We have dentists, they have specialists. Hairdressers have different specialities now. It's not just go to one hairdresser and have everything done. There's specialists. Naturopaths have specialties. So we don't just go to one place for everything anymore. We can find what our skills and strengths are and micro niche. That was a big learning for me, though. I refused it. I pushed against it as hard as I could for as long as I could. And it's really only been the past 6 months that I sort of looked. I think I kind of remember the moment where I was brushing my teeth or something, and I looked in the mirror and I'm like, Frances, what have you been doing? Come on, talk to the people you understand. Talk to the people. And that was when I went, right, it's time to talk about my story. It's time to accept that I have been through and done all of the things that I've done for the one purpose of coaching women who need support in each of those particular struggles. I'm leading the way. I've led myself, and now I'm leading the way for others. And that's exactly the same as what you do, or anybody who's niching or micro niching. And we should all, if we're in small business, we should all absolutely be looking at that. Because a person, I always refer, when I'm talking to the women in my programs or in my community, I'm like, I'm part of your toolkit. And I have my own toolkit, and in there I've got other resources, other types of coaches, other types of, wellness practitioners, all to support you if you need it. But otherwise, look at me as one resource in your toolkit. You have somebody for each thing that's going on in your life. Medical, health, wellness, mental health, your identity and your values, your career. There's a specialist for all of it. And no longer is it just one person.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea of having a toolkit with different people who are specialists. One challenge I'm seeing, because I work with so many leadership teams, I think on the other side of the coin, because I love what you said about strengths and really, really operating in your strengths. The biggest challenge I'm seeing for organizations is how do you, so let's take, I work with a lot of schools.
Yeah.
How do you function as a school with students in the current system? Because we can talk about the system changing, but as of right now, there's accreditation, and let's just say students are turning up. There's so many hours in the day. There's a curriculum you need to follow here in Australia. And yet you want to be a school where you can leverage that teacher's strengths.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on, from the flip side, how organizations can actually start adapting to create flexibility and space for their people to operate in their strengths?
Yeah. I mean, I think what I have seen in corporates, believe it or not, I see it as a little bit easier for them to be able to do that because they're not generally as restricted by curriculum, different type of reporting. So there's a little bit of more ability to be able to do that in corporates. But I think the most important thing first is to actually find out the strengths that you've got in your business, whether it's schools or whether it's a more constricted type of business like schools, or whether it's one where you've got a little bit more flexibility. But start to find out the strengths that you've got. Take an interest. See if your employees or the people working in that organization are interested in knowing their strengths. Because not everybody has hit a time of their life or that sort of epiphany maybe where they're actually interested. They think that what they're doing is their strengths. Whereas a lot of the time, and this has happened to me in the past, I've gone for a particular job, I've looked at the position description, my strengths are totally suited to that, I've got the job, but yet I don't actually do what the position description says, right? So I'm then not using my strengths. I'm learning new skills, which is great, and I might be good at them to get the job done, but I'm not using my strengths. And for some people, that is demotivating. For some, they don't care, they just want to do the job, and that's okay too. We need all types, right? It takes all types. But start with being interested in the strengths that you've got in your business and the people that have got them, and then ask them, do you want to use them? How do you think you could use them? Now, for schools, again, I've not really worked in the system, but I think there's potentially there an opportunity to create little communities where they might get to use their strengths. So if they're a little bit more creative, but they're not working the 9 to 5 in the creative space, could they start a little after hours community or during hours community of doing things that are a little bit more creative? AI is such a big thing now, right? Would teachers like to learn more of that? And do they have strengths where they actually could help others learn? But that's not a big part of their job at this stage. Is there a way that they can start to bring that in? Corporates are starting to do this a little bit by having focus groups, focus communities, with mental health, with health and well-being. So they're starting to do a little bit more in that. I think it's really, first of all, though, taking an interest and then seeing, actually asking the employees, are you interested in working to your strengths? I've just recently done my Gallup strengths and found out my top 5 and those sorts of things. Now, when I found them out now, it was just a few weeks ago, actually none of that surprises me at all.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in my 30s, I could have really done with that.
Yes, 100%.
So maybe it's also around having a conversation. Look, you might not think you need to know them, but here's how knowing them can help you. And it's not just at work. It's in how you do things outside of work, what type of hobbies you're interested in, why you're not interested in hobbies if you're not. It can help you really understand that little bit about yourself. And
Yes.
that's good all round. That's good in your whole life perspective, not just in your career.
Okay, I have to ask, because StrengthsFinder is one of my favorite assessments that I use all the time with teams. What are your top 5 strengths? Do you remember?
I knew you were going to ask me that. There is connector,
Yep.
empathy,
Haha.
and they're the 2 that stand out to me right now.
Connectedness, empathy. Yes. Both of those so key as a coach. Empathy is a great gift, great strength to have as a coach, because you just can't help but feel what the other person's feeling. So that would have been just an absolute clarification for you as to why you love doing what you're doing.
Absolutely. Again, it's almost this permission slip. And when I talked about human design, and so I know my human design type, um, the Gallup strengths actually confirmed a lot of what I found out from human design as well. And they're two
Yes.
completely, one is very evidence based. Some people would say human design is not. So it's really quite interesting when you look at that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll leave people hanging with the other three strengths. Maybe we'll have to do an episode about your strengths at some point
Okay.
to revisit it. But no, I definitely, I think you're right. I love that idea of being interested, because what you can do, I know this sounds like it may be overly simplistic but if people are listening and you're leading an organization and you're thinking about how do we do this, how do we create more, it's like when you go to buy a car. Like we've all experienced it. You go to buy a Toyota Camry, and suddenly, what do you see? Every single street you drive on is the Toyota Camry. You're like, how are there so many Toyota Camrys
So
everywhere
true.
now?
Yeah.
And I think, as simple as that is, it's true for wanting to build more into the strengths of your people. Once you start asking what your strengths are, then when you realize, whoa, hang on a second, Frances has empathy. Now you start seeing opportunities for more empathy everywhere in the organization. Like, wow, imagine if someone involved there really, because that group, wow, they're really task focused, and there's a bit of a lack of emotional intelligence and empathy in that group. Imagine if we drew Frances into some of their sessions. Suddenly you see the Camry everywhere because you've identified it. And so it sounds simple, but just by doing that first step of asking, being truly interested. And I think for the leaders, this sounds obvious, but I can't tell you how many CEOs do 360-degree feedback for their whole organization except for themselves. It's like, if you want strengths, if you want to really invest in your people, in your organization, and you're the CEO on the leadership team, you are the ceiling. It's going to start with you. You've got to go first and be interested in your own strengths and share that at a leadership team level and model that for your people. Otherwise, you're not going to see any buy-in.
100%. 100%. And I would just add on to that as well that once you know somebody's strengths, you also start to see where to coach. You also see how to communicate. Right? For many years now, we've talked about there's different communication styles. And yes, there is. But again, this comes down to how to really get the most out of people, is to find out their strengths and understand then how do they actually communicate? How do they want to be communicated with?
Yes.
Now, I get it, in a very large organization, that's not so easy to do, and it sounds time consuming. But the great thing about Gallup Strengths is they've got so much data there, so much research that's already done that can show you how to make small changes.
Yeah.
And the small changes make the big impact. Just being, to your point, Jonno, just being able to see that the CEO is interested, and this isn't a, well, you do it and I'll watch. Hang on, no, I'm actually going to participate. In fact, I'm going to lead the way. Just that sometimes is enough.
Yeah.
It's just enough.
And the other thing as well that you can do is, people leave people, right? Like we see that again and again, is that when people are leaving organizations, and I think Gallup's research in this shows that, one of the biggest factors, if not the largest, is the manager that a person has and their relationship with them.
Yeah.
And if that's terrible, they're gone. They'll leave yesterday. And if it's average, then they're much more likely to leave. And if they have a great relationship with their manager who's leading them, that's super stickability for them to stay around. And we've all experienced that, right? You have a terrible manager, your life is hell. You have an amazing manager, you look forward to going to work. It really is such a big factor. So if you're the manager who's wanting to do that better, the more you understand your people by doing StrengthsFinder, the more I think as well, it just gives you those, like you said, it's the small changes. For me, I remember the first time I learned that some people need an hour conversation and other people need a 5 minute, other people need a dot point email. And it's like, it sounds that sounds so simple, but hey, what if I'm giving the dot point email person an hour of my time? They're going to be, Jonno's insane the amount of time he wants to sit down and just reflect with me. And what if my person who needs the hour conversation, what if I'm sending them dot point emails? They're going to be like, Jonno doesn't care about me. Why doesn't he care as a manager? And suddenly the tiny change of just working out what each of them needs and communicating differently
Yeah.
can make all the difference between being a terrible boss, moving to an average, or if you feel like you're doing an average job, those type of tweaks can really make the difference for people. Go, you know what? Tell you what, the past couple of years, I've worked for you for 5 years, but the past couple of years, you've really grown as a leader, and I love working for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's what all of us really want.
Absolutely. Nobody goes to work, no matter the job, no matter the type of work, no matter the type of business. Nobody goes to hate what they're doing, to make mistakes, and to have a negative impact. Look at one of the most Googled words, and it's purpose. How do I know my purpose? It's one of the most Googled terms, right? People want to have an impact, and that's becoming more obvious in the environment that we're in now. And it's only going to be more interesting to people to be impactful in some way. And even you think about that in terms of back to the micro niching or to niching, again, you may only do what seems like one very small component of the overall process, but it's the impact that you have and the influence that you have. My favorite thing was always the circle of influence, because the influence that you have in that immediate circle, and then the impact and influence that they have on the greater circle, right? It's the ripple effect, the small impact that you may think that you're having. If it's a good impact, a strong, positive impact, it has a massive ripple effect.
And vice versa.
Exactly.
Yeah. We've all seen that. You've got a loved one or someone who's got a terrible boss, and how it can just flow on. And yeah, you're right. And well said. Well, let's jump into Leadership Express, because I've gone way over, but we're just having too much fun.
We really are.
Okay, firstly, what book have you gifted the most to others?
Oh, do you know, it's not a business book, but I have lent The Happiness Project to a lot of people. So that's by Gretchen Rubin.
Yes.
And
yes.
It's just a great, easy read. And there's just lots of impactful moments in there. So I do love, it's one that I actually go back to every now and again as well.
Awesome. What about great podcasts you're listening to, books you're reading at the moment, any blogs that are just really enjoying?
I have the latest podcast is probably not surprising. I've been listening to Mel Robbins' The Let Them Theory.
Yes.
For many reasons, for things that have been going on in my own life, but I also do that because everybody's talking about it. So as a coach, I need to know what's happening in that podcast, what is so strong that everyone's loving, to the point that they're getting tattoos saying "let them." What is it about that? Yeah, it's.
She's number one everywhere. It's crazy. She's obviously resonating deeply with people.
Look, she has a very real, authentic, genuine, and as she has gone on, Mel Robbins has definitely got more authentic and more real. She tells you more about her past, more about her story, and people love that.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
What's a great piece of advice you've received at some point?
I recently, from my mentor, was reminded of the seek to understand, not to be understood by Stephen Covey. And that really stood out for me, again, because I'm in this, world now of online coaching. I'm missing some of the mannerisms that I used to receive when I was face-to-face a lot more. Yeah. So there a lot more listening is involved, and I really do want the people that I'm working with to know, well, I also need to actually understand what's going on.
Love it. What's a commonly held belief in your industry that you passionately disagree with?
Oh, okay, we could be here for a while. One of
Any
the biggest.
soapboxes?
I've got so many.
Up you get. Get up there.
All right. One of the biggest beliefs in the personal development and coaching industry that I passionately disagree with is the idea that midlife is about finding your purpose. As if this one magical thing you're supposed to discover and suddenly everything's going to make sense to you. And I call BS on that. So we're not, for anyone that is in this midlife era, which by the way, Google will tell you it's somewhere between 35 to 60. So
Okay.
I wouldn't have thought anyone 35 was hitting midlife, but there you go. It isn't about finding yourself. It's kind of more about choosing yourself. It's about reclaiming who you already are underneath all of these roles and expectations and obligations. So it's not creating a purpose, it's not finding a purpose, and it's not a magical everything now makes sense to me. You get to decide now what excites you, what matters, and what kind of life you want to build, and you get to decide how to do it on your terms. So if anyone's trying to tell you it's about find your purpose, I think that's a myth, and I think it's keeping you stuck.
I like that. You know what? It's funny how much that resonates with what I do with leadership teams about organizations, because I feel like a lot of organizations feel like they need to find their purpose. Like, we just got to get together and we got to really be creative and find out what it is and it's like, actually what organizations need to do is they need to look back. They need to actually articulate what's already there in their DNA. And then I like what you said about choose it, because it's like, once you've clarified that, the biggest mistake a lot of organizations make isn't being able to articulate what their purpose is, although that is one. The bigger issue is that once they've articulated it, no one's willing to do the incredibly hard, disciplined, sacrificial work to stick to it, to choose it day after day after day. And as an organization, to choose, that's what your point of difference is. That's who you focus on. That's what sets you apart. No to this, no to that, no to this. It's like, no, you got to articulate that and then choose it every day. It's funny that kind of reflects what you're saying about the individual as well.
I remember the purpose when I was in corporate. It always felt like it was more of a new marketing campaign.
Yes.
Let's get together another year after year and let's redesign our purpose. No, let's remind us why we're here, why you started the business, what was so important, what the values are of the business. But like you said, then we're here, right? We're choosing it. We're choosing it if we're here. So now how do we make it happen? Who are we going to be to make it happen?
And what are we going to say no to? Who are we going to say no to? Which is hard for the organization, hard for the individual. But if that's why you're here and this is what you're called to do as a person or as an organization, then maybe it's time to start saying no to that thing over there that's a bit of a distraction.
Absolutely.
And hey,
again,
that's a sucky process. It's hard.
Well, like we were talking about, we are scared to niche as small businesses. But also perhaps big businesses also need to look at, we're not here for everyone.
Yeah.
But who we are here for, let's 110% be here for them.
It sounds so simple. Man, it's hard to do, but I love how you just articulated that. Okay, last question.
Okay.
If you could only give one piece of leadership advice to a young leader, what would you say?
Oh, goodness. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't let the ego, what can be termed as the ego, get in the way. Ask for help. If you don't know who you can trust to ask for help, that is a bigger issue. And so, as in anything, we all need to have our trusted network. So whether you're in business for yourself, whether you're a leader in a business, find your trusted network and ask for help. Even if it's brainstorming something, it's as simple, it can be the really simple things. It can be the voicing what's been going on in your head and articulating it and getting it out. And then you're probably going to do the old, Oh, I don't know why I just said that, because now that I've said it, I already know the answer. You know, we've all had those moments. But if you don't have a trusted network to do that with, you will continuously go around in your head and you'll try to do it on your own. And the thing you're most scared about will probably happen. And that's you won't quite get it right.
Boom, that's a mic drop. I think few people are going to press rewind and listen to that again, because that was, I think that's really profound, is ask for help. But if you don't know who to ask for help, there's your problem. Do you have a trusted network? Ooh, that's challenging. I love that. So for people who are listening and going and frantically Googling Frances Scadden, how to book her um, to help me with my everything. But in general, how can people find you online?
Well, hopefully, if they're Googling, my SEO's worked and I'm coming up as number one. But there are a number of ways. So I'm pretty much on every social platform. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I am on LinkedIn, and they all have the opportunity to book a call with me. You can also find me on YouTube, and you can find me at francescadden.com.au.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to our listeners for tuning in. This conversation, I'm always pleasantly surprised in every episode, to tell you the truth, when we go down these different tangents. And I just love where we ended up today. That was just, really. I personally had some epiphanies in terms of some different things which I'd never put together before. So that was really wonderful. But I want to thank most of all, just thank you, Frances, for being so vulnerable to share some of your story and modeling that. And I really believe what I love doing this is that there might be some, particularly some woman in midlife who is, maybe just has the headphones on while walking the dog somewhere in the world, and this is their kind of aha moment, hearing you talk about some of the things you shared. So it was really significant, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate the challenging conversations. Yeah, it's really where the good stuff happens. It's where the growth really happens. So I appreciate that. Thank you.